Welcome, Broadway babies, to the latest story of Emily and Jeff, as we tell you all about the wonderful world of Schmicago.
Great, I love it when we have a narrator in place of an actual story. You can continue.
Really? Do I have your permission?
Welcome to Schmicago.
This is very different.
Well, hello, everybody!
Wait.
Guess what?
It's back.
Guess what? Schmigadoon is back for season 2. And Jeff and I are back with all new Schmiganalysis.
That's right.
Yep.
All the Schmiganalyses you can handle, baby.
Yeah, we're going to be making one of these after every single episode. We might even have a few special guests to look forward to.
I'm Jeff. I was a musical theater actor for about 15 to 20 years in New York, so I did a lot of shows on the road and a lot of shows in off-Broadway or at regional houses. And so we did a lot of shows like this.
And I'm Emily, and I'm an actor, producer, director, teacher, but most importantly, I am a musical theater historian, or I'm trying to be. I'm going to grad school for it. I'm chipping away at it. So
you might like this show.
It'll be official soon. So this show is my bread and butter, and
like
I
right there.
love breaking it down. So season 1 of Schmigadoon was all about the golden age of Broadway, right? And we have a whole playlist full of videos that you can watch up here, breaking down every episode of season 1, which took us from musicals that were about from 1943 to 1960, which is what we call the golden age of Broadway. But now we're moving forward in time.
Things are getting interesting.
Yes, we are moving forward kind of from 1960 all the way through, I think, 1979, so right before the 1980s. So it's going to be really fun. So this is episode 1.
Welcome to
Schmicago!
All right, so we're going to break this down and get into every single reference we could find. You ready, Jeff?
Yeah, let's do this.
All right, let's go. So Schmigadoon and Schmicago is the creation of Cinco Paul and Ken Dario. Our first episode was directed by Alice Matthias, one of those, and we have choreography by Chris Catelli. Already in episode 1, we're seeing a lot of more one-to-one direct parallels with both songs and characters than we did in season 1. Season 1 was a lot of archetypes and styles with a lot of different references from the era, but here we're seeing a lot of really specific references.
Musical influences from this episode include Stephen Schwartz, Cy Coleman and Dorothy Fields, and Kander Nebb.
And all the choreographic influences from this episode are from Bob Fosse shows.
Unmistakable.
We have Pippin, Chicago, Cabaret, the film version, and Sweet Charity referenced in this episode when it comes to the musical numbers, and lots more in general. So the episode opens with Josh and Melissa, our protagonists, right after coming out of Schmigadoon, 10 seconds after coming out, and they're feeling the true love, and they end up getting married. And they're together for about 2 years before they start feeling the monotony of life setting in.
They have some specific drama where they're trying to get pregnant and are having some issues with that.
Yeah. And they're starting to feel the yearn for Schmigadoon. There's a point in a grocery store where Mel overhears a little girl asking for pudding, and she turns around and says, "Did somebody say corn pudding?" And then Broadway's Jessica Vosk responds, no one wanted corn pudding. So we have an Elphaba cameo the first few minutes into the show. We also see Josh in his office being confronted by an angry dad named Hank, who threatens to put Josh into prison, doctor prison. Little foreshadowing there for the rest of the episode.
And he also finds a little kazoo in the drawer, which reminds him of the little boy from season 1.
Little Carson.
Little Carson.
So after another unsuccessful attempt at getting pregnant, Josh and Melissa decide to take a chance and search for Schmigadoon. So they don their best Schmigadoonian clothes and head off into the woods. In fact, you also hear a little slight pastiche of Sondheim's Into the Woods playing in the underscoring. And even Josh says they need to get home before dark after they search unsuccessfully for Schmigadoon. So they hop into their car and they get a flat tire. Now, I've been seeing online people say this is a Rocky Horror reference. I'm not sure if this is a Rocky Horror reference or like just a trope
Yeah,
of storytelling.
kind of a trope.
But, you
Rocky
know,
Horror happens to be a
sure,
musical,
whatever. I mean, it's
so-
not raining or anything, and, like, whatever. But, sure, I'll give it to you. We'll take every bone we can get. But after wandering through the fog, our leads find themselves in a musical world. But it's not Schmigadoon, it is Schmicago. So, just like Season 1 gave us the title song Schmigadoon with an exclamation point that was meant to sound like Oklahoma, in this, we have Welcome to Schmicago, which is a direct parallel to the opening number from 1972's Pippin, Magic to Do.
Mm-hmm.
It is in every way Magic to Do,
Yeah.
from the opening organ note to the Fosse jazz hands.
Yes.
To
The
Titus
net-
Burgess. Titus
As
Burgess
the leading
playing
player.
the leading player, who was originated by Ben Vereen. In this
Yes.
version, he's known as the narrator, but they essentially fill the same role. The lyrics are also very evocative of Stephen Schwartz's Magic to Do.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these musicals from the 70s start with this kind of join us in this magical world where your cares can go away and things are kind of dirty and you can and sexy. And so we get some of that. We get lots of references to very famous Bob Fosse choreography, not just choreography from Magic to Do, but also just trademark Fosse moves. You get kind of the isolations of like the torso. There's one point where the dancers go like that and do this move, which is straight out of Where the Gin is Cold but the Piano's Hot from Anne Ranking's Schmicago.
And then there's Schmigady-Doo.
Yeah, instead of
Georgia.
doodly-doo, we have Schmigady-doo,
I mean,
Schmigady-eye.
How can you resist? Then Schmigady-eye. Nailed it.
It opens with the white gloves in the pitch black, which is, again, exactly how the original production of Pippin started.
Yeah. I think it's just so fun in general how Cinco Paul and the creators are able to do these incredible send-ups of the pinnacle shows of the era and those songs, but also tell their own stories.
After the first verse, some of our leading characters come through and stand in front and get to sing a little bit, which is, again, what happens in Pippin. Before you really get to meet these characters, you see them each have a little moment and sing a little lyric that is kind of evocative of what their story is going to be. So this is where we meet a lot of the players, and Josh and Melissa recognize them. And then Melissa makes the wonderful statement that, would you wave hello to Sutton Foster and the Music Man because you recognized her from Thoroughly Modern Millie? So we set up the idea that these characters are not the same characters from the last season, but they are being played by many of the same actors.
Which is such a cool idea. I mean, I love that concept. It's sort of like a traveling troupe of musical theater performers, only this is a television show. But I think it's really smart to reuse the same cast.
We also get a line where a bunch of orphans come forward and say, "And orphans who don't want to die." We have girl and boy orphans in the mix. So that means obviously Annie, which came out in the 70s. But the other parallel to that would be Oliver, which came out in 1960 in London and didn't come to Broadway till 62. That's how we know we're working with a 20-year period of musicals here. So it's an even bigger, wider swath than what we were working with last season. We also get some of those like weird Stephen Schwartz lyrics that sound good when you're singing them, but don't actually make a lot of sense when you say them out loud. This pops up a few times. Titus says, "Leave your fancy degrees and your jobs and your cheese." Yeah.
Yeah,
Why not?
This is when Broadway got dirty and real and grimy.
It's not dirty. The costumes in the opening number are all, they're skewing kind of towards the Pippin original cast, but there's also some Schmicago in there. It's all very much like painted faces, circus, vaudevillian style. All the leads who step forward are characters we meet in the first episode, except for Alan Cumming and Kristen Chenoweth, who are obviously going to be Sweeney and Mrs. Lovett type characters.
Yeah.
But we haven't met them for real yet, but it's going to be fun.
So then Titus, as the narrator, continues to narrate and bring us into this story further. And we find out that Josh and Melissa are really the stars of this story.
Yeah, there's a scene not unlike the opening scene of Pippin where he breaks the fourth wall like a narrator do and talks directly to the audience, kind of past Josh and Melissa, and sets up their story just like he does in Pippin. And Melissa makes the point that a lot of these shows had narrators rather than a story. But I think she's missing the point that a lot of these shows were vaudeville pastiches in their own right. And they had stories, but whatever, it's a funny joke. But Josh is not a musical theater guy, even though he's really digging the vibes of Schmicago. But Mel makes the point that she's not really familiar with this era either, after a traumatic event seeing Sweeney Todd as a child. She does make a point to say that they left early, so she, I bet that's going to come into play later because she doesn't actually know how Sweeney Todd ends. Mel also makes this kind of nitpicky point about imperfect rhymes and how they happen a lot in this era. And I think that's really funny because it really does bother some people and other people not so much. I'm not going to tell you where I land on this.
I am all for it. Imperfect rhymes are great. I do see people being like super nitpicky about that though.
Yeah.
In the old days, a rhyme was a rhyme. It had to actually rhyme. But now,
Time
you
and
know,
fine.
things change. So the Hotel Schmicago is on Lloyd Street, which is probably a reference to Andrew Lloyd Webber, who hasn't shown up yet, but might, because they got started in the 70s.
Yeah, he got started in the 70s.
Early 70s, too.
I don't know. So far it seems very American 60s, 70s musical driven, but hey, you know, a reference is a reference.
It would be surprising for it to go there, but possible.
So they make their way to the Hotel Schmicago, and we meet our next character, the effervescent, beautiful, amazing Anne Harada, playing Madame Frau.
So good.
Which is a really funny name because Madame Frau is the same word.
Frau
is Madame in German. She seems to be kind of an archetype of a few different kind of characters. Middle-aged women in these kind of musicals were often kind of like the madams of the brothel, if you will.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of...
Tough but fair.
There's a bit of Fraulein Schneider from Cabaret, but I also see a little bit of Matron Mama Morton from Chicago in her. But she does have the thick German accent, of course, so there you go.
She's having a blast with that.
Oh, and of course, we have Joanne from Company sitting on the couch at the Hotel Schmicago, or what is assumed to be Joanne from Company, because she is nursing a vodka stinger, and she keeps saying, "I'll drink to that."
So they check into their shabby room, and who pops in there to see them are Sally Bowles to just shake things up.
Yeah, so Dove Cameron comes in, and she's playing a character named Jenny Banks, which is a play on Sally Bowles, and she's complete with black bob and green fingernails, just like Sally Bowles, and it's very evocative of her first scene in Cabaret, where she meets the protagonist, Cliff Bradshaw, and kind of comes in like a little flibberty-gibbet and just kind of right off the bat is like, we're best friends, and oh, aren't you divine and wonderful, and you simply must stay forever. And she really, really shows you how exhausting it would be to be friends with Sally Bowles.
It's so fun to see Dove Cameron just switch it up, because it's like she was born to play this part. She does it so well, she fits it like a glove, and it is just an amazing performance in this episode.
Yeah, the first season she was Betsy, and she was kind of the goody-goody girl who was a little bad. But she wasn't as big as a part as it seems like Jenny is shaping up to.
No.
So we're really playing to Dove Cameron's wonderful strengths. Mm-hmm. She invites them to the club where she's going to do a performance. Josh doesn't recognize her because she has black hair.
It's hard sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And we head to the Krat Club. And when Josh and Melissa come in, everyone in the club is sitting in kind of a grotesque frozen tableau. Again, very reminiscent of Cabaret, but not unlike what a lot of these musicals were doing at the time.
And that takes us to our next musical number, Do We Shock You?
Yeah, and Do We Shock You is a direct homage to Big Spender from Sweet Charity.
And European Vacation.
from 1966. And again, this is kind of on the earlier end of these musicals. In fact, it was Bob Fosse's first musical that he ever directed. He had been a choreographer for a long time, but by the time Sweet Charity rolled around, he was with Gwen Verdon, and they wanted to work on a show together. So he conceived, choreographed, and directed Sweet Charity. And one of the biggest numbers from that is Big Spender. And this is Big Spender in a lot of ways. They have the iconic kind of ballet bar that the girls kind of drape themselves unglamorously over. Lots of weird angles with the body. A lot of Fosse signatures, like little head moves and things like that.
I think what's so fun about what they can do with Schmicago is also comment on it while it's happening. So they're commenting with the parody, and then you also have a character who's commenting. Characters can comment on it in the scene. It's pretty interesting. Kind of like it.
In the actual song, it's taxi dancers at a club, basically leering and kind of telling guys to kind of come over to them for a dance. They can't quite go right out and say that they're hookers, but it's very heavily implied. And so the joke of this song is, do we shock you? And so they're singing all these things that maybe in 1966 on a Broadway stage would be shocking, but by our standards are very tame. So they point out that there's a man in a dress, and Josh and Melissa are like, whatever.
Yeah.
One of the girls says, I like boys and girls. And one of them says she has a tattoo. Another one says she had a female orgasm. They're not even blinking.
Yeah, of course not.
And then that takes them to the really funny lyric.
We're really putting a lot of effort into it.
It takes a lot of effort to make it look
something
effortless. And that number, Fosse does little hand wiggles. But then also the girls do these big busting out dance moves. Again, it's all from Big Spender. It's all there. It's everything that they're parodying is right there in the original. And we even get a little hold your hats and hallelujah, mama's gonna give it to you in the orchestration from the musical Gypsy, when they kind of bust out with some of their big dance breaks in that song. So it's one of those great numbers that really lets some of the women who are the core dancers in the show shine, which the first season was really good at too. This is the only song in the episode though that isn't a parallel to Stephen Schwartz or a Kander and Ebb. It's all Coleman and Fields, so good on you guys.
So then we have Ariana DeBose, who returns as the MC.
Yes, and obviously
cool.
She is being the MC from Cabaret. She's very gender bent, which is a lot of fun.
And the Cabaret girls are all the orphans from Annie.
They are all named after the orphans from Annie. Ariana introduces them. Annie, Kate, Molly, Pepper, Duffy, Tessie, and the only one who's not an orphan, Elsie.
Uh-oh.
Which is a reference to Sally Bowles' ill-fated roommate, Elsie, in the song Cabaret. She used to have a girlfriend known as Elsie, with whom she shared 4 sordid rooms in Chelsea.
And we have a new addition. This season we have Patrick Page coming in as the owner of the club, so I guess he's Krat.
Octavius
Krat.
And he goes, Krat.
He's very,
My name is
very low,
Krat.
very low.
And he's a Broadway star. Yep. He's known for Spider-Man and Hadestown and a few other things. He's been around for a while. I'm not sure if Krat is supposed to be anyone in particular. The only one I kind of get vibes from is maybe Judge Turpin from Sweeney Todd, but he's a little more dapper than that. So he seems to be a wholly new creation, but let me know if he reminds any of you of a character from a musical from this era.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It did feel like they were kind of creating something new there. So, fun fact, the one time I did do Cabaret, I was doing summer stock. It was the same summer I did Joseph for the first time, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and Footloose. So, but this Cabaret was the one where I didn't really have a lead. So I was just in the ensemble, and it was awesome. But I had a few lines as this guy, Max, who is the club owner. And I was hoping the whole time that I would get more to do. And I think I think they were getting my vibe there because it seems like Patrick Page is going to have a lot to do.
Yeah, so maybe there's a little bit of Max from Cabaret in there as well.
Yeah.
He's also carrying a box of chocolates, so make sure you pay attention to that. And then he says he has to go powder his nose, and he exits. And then the MC returns and says a very familiar line. In fact, the first words you hear in the musical Cabaret, she says, "Meine Damen und Herren, Mesdames et Messieurs, ladies and germs." So I do like her ladies and germs. And then she introduces Jenny Banks and her big number, Kaput. And Kaput is a bit of a mishmash. It's mostly Mein Herr from Cabaret.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of the song Cabaret in the verses. So the verses are very, like, I used to have a girlfriend known as Elsie, storytelling verses. But then once you get to the chorus, they do sound like Mein Herr. And did you know Mein Herr is not in the original stage version?
You know, I didn't know that.
Was it in your version?
Yes, absolutely.
That's because it came out in the 1972 film version with Liza with the iconic bowler hat and the Cabaret chairs, which they're using in this number as well. And it was really popular, so it was kind of added to, I think, every subsequent version does Mein Herr.
It's just such a powerful song in the show, and the send-up was amazing.
So the number features the iconic chairography that Liza Minnelli pulled off. Again, Bob Fosse choreography. The original Cabaret was not directed by Bob Fosse. It was directed by Hal Prince. But Fosse did do the film version. And one of the things that is consistent about all versions of Cabaret is that it takes place in two worlds. It takes place in the real world, and it takes place in the Kit Kat Club, which Hal Prince famously called Limbo. And the numbers in Limbo comment on the situations in the real world. Yeah. And in the film, Fosse even took out all the songs that took place in the real world. But even from this first number, Kaput, we're seeing a song on a stage that the other characters can hear, but it's directly commenting on the status of Mel and Josh, which is they're getting tired with their relationship and, you know, hope they don't go kaput. Wonderful choreography. Dove Cameron knocked it out of the park.
So good.
And it's just, we got the flexed feet and the slamming the chairs and everything that you love about Mein Herr from Cabaret. We also get a kind of a fun punny reference in the song. She sings, "It was a fine affair, but now get out of Mein Herr."
Yeah.
As in my hair, not my hair.
They couldn't resist that one.
So that was a good one.
You have to put it in. Yeah. Brilliant.
This is also our first direct reference to Candor and Ebb. So we're getting a lot of that jazzy stuff all over the Krat Club. Josh goes to the bathroom, and he walks by a guy in the bottom half of a horse's suit reading Mein Kampf. I don't think that's a reference to anything in particular, but I guess you'd have to be a horse's ass to read Mein Kampf. And this is when Josh discovers Elsie the showgirl dead in her dressing room. He thinks he's going to the bathroom. He opens the door, and there she is. And being a doctor, of course, he goes to help her, and he gets her blood all over his hands. A showgirl sees them, and Melissa and Josh decide to run out of there to cheese it because the fuzz is coming.
Yeah, that's what happens in these kind of shows. So of course, yes, they're trying to escape, and they get in the car, and they're almost getting out of there when suddenly, no, it turns out the leprechaun.
The car won't start, so they lift the hood, and then Martin Short as the leprechaun has messed with the car.
Yeah. And
he sings a little song that is basically all that jazz from Chicago.
As he did with the first season, sort of giving them little clues as to what they're supposed to accomplish here without actually telling them anything.
What are they supposed to accomplish?
They need to have a happy end.
A happy ending, and they don't really know what that means. So
because it's a happy end.
They try to wander through the fog, but just like Schmigadoon, it takes them right back to where they started, and they're still in Schmicago. This is when Jamie Camille shows up as Sergeant Rivera, and he arrests Josh to take him to jail. Dr. Jail. It's not actually Dr. Jail, but he's a doctor going to jail. Mm-hmm. And so they throw him in a little paddy wagon, and, you know, he's holding on to the bars. And our narrator returns for one last high note and jazz hands, and that's where we leave the episode. So a lot of references already packed into one little episode, into 30 minutes, and there's even more to come. Jeff, you know a lot more about these musicals than last season, right?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know why, but a lot of the shows that I did in my career were shows from this era. And I didn't really do so many from the previous era, so a lot of them, I was missing a lot of references that obviously you were getting all of them either way. But the first season was more of the classical, obviously. So these, it's just sort of like a trip back in time a little bit, because I can't tell you how much I love the homage. They're not direct parodies. They're inspired by, but there's an absolute direct core song that they use, and then they branch out from there. Well, so it's sort of like a couple that is in an escape room or something, or an immersive experience where they're in the musical and they're the stars and everything is happening to them. And that sounds like a great idea, but it's not as so easy to pull off. But I feel like the writing really nails it, because we really care about these characters. There are real stakes here because I'm invested in their relationship. I just love it. I never thought of anything like this. I feel like it's next level musical theater writing.
So that's episode 1 of Schmicago. Lots of fun Easter eggs and goodies. Let us know if there was anything we missed from episode 1. We have lots more to talk about in episode 2. Oh, hold on to your hats. 5, 6, 7, 8. We'll see you in the next one, kids.
Join us, leave your fields to flower. Join us, leave your cheese to sour.